By dusk his mate will be my prey. A dark werewolf romance. Chapter 1. The curse would claim him by nightfall. Caden stood at the edge of the ravine overlooking the Atlantic, watching the sun bleed into the horizon like a wound that wouldn't close, and wondered if he'd miss the smell of salt air when he was gone. The wind drove dark waves against the cliffs below, carrying the brine-soaked scent of the sea and the distant, mournful howls of his pack preparing for the hunt. 3 days until the full moon. 3 days until the curse his grandfather had placed on him 22 years ago finally collected its debt. 3 days to find the one thing that could save him. Someone who would whisper his true name before moonrise on the night he was fated to die. The problem? His true name had been magically sealed. Hidden even from himself. He didn't know what it was. No one living did. And the man who'd cursed him, his own grandfather, hollowed out by dark magic and inconsolable grief, had engineered the conditions for breaking it to be nearly impossible. Hey there, story lovers. Welcome back to another unforgettable journey, right here on the channel. I am so thrilled you found your way to us today. Seriously, where in the world are you listening from? Drop your location in the comments. Are you tucked in at home? Sneaking this in during your commute? I love knowing where my incredible audience is tuning in from. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now because trust me, you do not want to miss a single chapter of what's coming. This channel is your home for intense, emotional, hopelessly addictive stories that wrap around your heart and refuse to let go. Ring that notification bell too. You'll thank yourself later. Now let me tell you about Caden because his time is running out. And the woman who can save him doesn't even know he exists yet. Caden Voss had been alpha of the Ironwood Pack for 6 years. Ever since his father was killed defending their territory against a rival pack's midnight raid. At 29, he was considered young for the role, but he was fearless, calculating, and ferociously devoted to the 81 souls who called Ironwood home. He'd guided them through blood feuds and bitter winters, and the relentless political chess game that came with holding prime mountain territory in the Pacific Northwest. He had outlasted everything the world threw at him, except this curse. Alpha. The voice behind him belonged to Jasper, his beta and the closest thing to a brother he'd ever known. The pack's fraying. They can feel something's wrong with you. I know. Caden didn't turn. It bleeds through the pack bonds like a fever. I can hear their worry like static I can't switch off. Then tell them the truth. Jasper stepped up beside him, his jaw tight. They deserve to know their alpha is dying. And start a panic? Leave us exposed the moment the Greystone pack is already circling our eastern ridgeline. Caden shook his head. No. I'll solve this. How? You've brought in every witch, every shaman, every occult specialist within 1,000 miles. They all say the same thing. The curse is sealed unless you meet the exact conditions for breaking it. Jasper's voice cracked with barely leashed fear. And those conditions are impossible, Caden. How do you get someone to whisper your true name when you don't even know it yourself? There has to be a way. There's always a way. But even as he said it, the ground beneath his certainty felt thin. The curse was merciless in its elegance. His grandfather Aldrich, consumed by dark magic after his mate died in an accident Aldrich believed Caden's father could have prevented, had blamed the alpha bloodline for his loss. When Caden's father refused to surrender leadership or offer reparations, Aldrich had cursed the entire line. Caden's father died before the curse could reach him. His mother had vanished north, unable to watch her son walk toward a fate she couldn't stop. And Caden had spent 22 years knowing that on the night of his 31st birthday, under the full moon, the curse would wake up and take everything from him. Unless someone whispered his true name. The name Aldrich had ripped from him when he was 9 years old, locking it behind a spell so intricate that even the old man's death a decade ago hadn't cracked it open. He'd taken the secret to his grave, laughing as he went. The answer exists, Caden said quietly. I can feel it. Like a thread being pulled. Like something's trying to lead me toward it. That could be the curse distorting your instincts, Jasper said. Or it could be fate. Caden finally turned to face his beta. I'm going into Harrogate tomorrow. There's a shop that opened last month. Rare books, occult texts. Maybe they have something the others missed. A bookshop. Jasper made no effort to hide his skepticism. You're staking your life on a bookshop. I'm staking my life on refusing to stop looking. Caden's eyes flared gold, the wolf pressing close to the surface. I didn't hold this pack together through 6 years of war, and whether by surrendering Jasper. I'm not starting now. Jasper exhaled through his nose, then nodded slowly. Then I'm coming with you. No. The pack needs you here. If something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. If something happens, Caden continued, the pack needs a steady hand. You're next in line. You need to be visible, calm, ready. Let them see you're prepared if the worst comes. The words hung between them like smoke. Finally, Jasper bowed his head, not just to his alpha, but to his oldest friend. Don't make me stand where you stand, Caden. I'm not built for it. Not yet. Then I'd better not die. Caden's smile didn't reach his eyes. That night sleep refused him. He stood in his cabin sparse despite his rank, because he'd never seen the point of luxury, staring at the research that covered every surface. Ancient texts, hand-copied scrolls, scanned pages of obscure grimoires, printed forum threads from corners of the internet most humans didn't know existed. 22 years of searching. And the answer still stayed buried. His phone lit up. A message from Sylvie, the pack's healer and the closest thing Ironwood had to a seer. Dreamwalk tonight. Saw something that changes everything. Come to the workroom. Now. Caden was out the door before the screen dimmed. Sylvie's visions were not decorative. They had saved lives, had turned tides of conflict before the first blow was thrown. If she'd seen something connected to the curse. Sylvie's workroom sat at the northern edge of Pack territory, built into the hillside, its entrance hidden behind a curtain of old-growth cedar. She met him at the door before he could knock, her silver-streaked black hair loose and wild, her dark eyes still carrying the distant shimmer of wherever her dream had taken her. Tell me, Caden said, no preamble. I saw a woman. Sylvie turned and walked, and Caden followed her inside, where her seeing bowl sat on the work table, its surface still rippling faintly. Young mid-20s. Auburn hair, gray eyes. She was standing in a room full of books, and there was something pouring from her lips. Not sound, not light, but something older. Something that predates both. What does that mean? It means she carries the gift of true names. Sylvie's voice was low and deliberate. It's extraordinarily rare, Caden. Perhaps one person in every generation is born able to perceive and speak the true names of living things. Most of them never understand what they have. Caden's pulse was loud in his ears. Where is she? Did you see enough to find her? The shop had a sign in the window. Thornfield Books and Rare Curiosities. And it's not far. It's right here in Harrogate. The bookshop. The one he'd been planning to visit tomorrow anyway. Fate didn't deal in coincidences. There's more, Sylvie said softer now. In the dream I heard a voice, your grandfather's voice, though it was more echo than man. He said, he has 3 chances to make her speak his name. 3 chances before the moon takes him. But she must whisper it willingly, knowingly, pure of heart, or the curse will not break. It will feed. 3 chances. Caden's mind was already moving. I can't rush it, can't force it. She has to choose. And if she speaks the wrong name or speaks without true intention, Sylvie let the silence fill in the rest. Every failed attempt would accelerate the curse. Push too hard, move too fast, and he could die hours ahead of the moon's rising. Then I'll have to be careful. Extraordinarily careful. Caden held Sylvie's gaze. Did you see whether she helps me? Did you see an outcome? Sylvie's expression shifted into something careful and sad. I saw 2 futures. In one she whispers your name and you live. In the other you die. But she's standing over you with her hands pressed to your chest and her face destroyed, like something vital had been cut out of her. So she matters to me. Either way. More than matters. Sylvie paused, choosing her next words precisely. Caden, in both futures there was a mate bond between you. Bright as copper wire, solid as bedrock. This woman isn't simply your only hope for survival. She is your mate. The word landed like a stone dropped from a great height. Mate. The one soul in all the world shaped to fit alongside his. The other half of something he'd stopped believing was real. He'd buried that hope years ago. The curse had made deep connection feel dangerous, cruel. Most wolves found their mates before 30. At 29, with death circling him like a predator, he'd accepted he would die alone. But now, I have to meet her, Caden said. Tomorrow. At first light. Be careful, Sylvie warned. The mate bond is not gentle and she is human, I could tell from the dream. She won't have language for what she feels when she meets you. She won't know why you seem like someone she's always been waiting for. You cannot give her the full truth at once. You will frighten her away. So I court her. In 3 days. You make her trust you, Sylvie said. Before you ask her to save your life. Her smile was small and sad. Which is, I understand, nearly impossible given your timeline. Then I'll make 3 days enough. Caden's jaw was set. I've faced down death on every front this pack has ever known. I can reach one woman. Can you? Sylvie's voice was genuinely gentle. Because what I saw tells me she is not easily reached. She's built walls most people never bother to climb. You're going to have to find the door, Caden. In 3 days. Then I'd better get started tomorrow. Walking back to his cabin under a sky full of cold stars, Caden felt something he had not felt in a long time: hope. Not the desperate, thin kind he'd been manufacturing out of stubbornness. Real hope with weight to it, warm at its center. The moon was barely a sliver overhead. In 3 nights it would be full, and his 31st birthday would arrive. 3 days to find her, earn her trust, and somehow guide her to whisper a name she had no way of knowing she was looking for. 3 days to fall in love and to be loved in return. It should have been impossible. But standing under those stars, feeling fate pull at him like a tide, he could finally stop fighting. Caden let himself believe in impossible things. Because the alternative was accepting death, and he had never accepted anything without a fight. Tomorrow he would meet his mate. Tomorrow everything would change. And somewhere in Harrogate, in a bookshop full of dust and old magic and secrets tucked between pages, a woman who didn't know she could save him was about to have the ground shift entirely beneath her feet. The clock was already running. But for the first time in 22 years, Caden Voss believed he might actually survive. Chapter 2. Mara Delacroix had always known things she shouldn't. Not in the way of premonitions or visions, nothing so dramatic. What Mara knew were names. True names, the kind that lived beneath the surface of a person like roots beneath soil. Invisible to everyone except her. When she met someone, their real name would arrive in her mind, quiet and clear. Like a word remembered from a half-forgotten language. Not immediately, sometimes it could take minutes of conversation, a full look into someone's eyes, but it always came. She would hear Daniel, and know his true name was grief turned into armor. She would meet Patricia, and hear voice that carries light into crowded rooms. As a child, growing up between her mother's cramped apartment and a series of relatives who took her in out of obligation rather than love, she tried once or twice to describe it. They called it a game, a habit, a way of making herself feel special. She'd learned to stop trying. She hadn't outgrown it. She just learned where to put it. Now at 27, Mara had constructed a life entirely organized around the power of words. Thornfield books and rare curiosities occupied the ground floor of a narrow Victorian building in Harrogate, and it smelled the way she imagined a scholar's heaven might, cedar and parchment and the faint metallic ghost of old ink. She'd opened it 8 months ago, funded by an inheritance from a great-aunt she'd barely known. The same great-aunt who'd left behind a letter with words Mara had read so many times the paper had worn soft at the folds. You hear what things truly are, Mara. It is old blood in you, older than any of us fully understood. The world beyond the human one will find you eventually. It is drawn to this gift like moths to a specific flame. When it does, trust the names you hear. They will not mislead you. Mara had thought the letter was lovely, poetic nonsense. She'd thought that right up until the first werewolf walked into her shop. 3 months ago. A woman named Solène, quiet-voiced, looking for a specific text on territorial boundary rights. Mara had heard her true name the moment their eyes met. She who runs ahead of the storm to warn the pack. And she'd known, with a bone-deep certainty she couldn't explain, that Solène was not entirely what she appeared to be. They'd become something like friends since then. Solène had never confirmed anything directly, but she dropped enough careful hints that Mara had been able to piece together the picture. Werewolves were real. The supernatural world was real. And the gift Mara had spent her life half hiding was, apparently, something that world paid close attention to. On a gray Wednesday morning that felt entirely ordinary, Mara was reorganizing the back shelves when the bell above the door rang. The man who entered stole the breath directly from her chest. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair cut close on the sides and longer on top, and eyes that shifted between deep brown and amber like the color hadn't settled yet. He moved the way wild things moved, controlled and deliberate, every placement of his feet intentional. Something in the room changed when he entered it, the air becoming charged in a way Mara could feel in her back teeth. He was extraordinary to look at. Not in any soft or decorative way, but in the way of something built for purpose, powerful in a manner that bypassed aesthetics entirely and went straight to instinct. Welcome to Thornfield, Mara said, proud. Her voice came out level. Can I point you toward anything? Those amber-brown eyes found hers, and the contact felt physical, like something connecting. I need books on name-bound curses. Practical literature, not theoretical. Breaking methodology, if it exists. His voice was deep and rough, with an economy of words that suggested he didn't often explain himself twice. Mara's focus sharpened. That's a specific corner of a niche field. Do you need historical case studies or working application? Working application. Urgently. He moved toward her, and she caught his scent, pine resin, cold stone, and something underneath that was alive in a way she couldn't classify. Time is a significant factor. She looked at him more closely. The exhaustion was obvious once she stopped being distracted by everything else. The bruised shadows under his eyes, the faint tension across his shoulders like a man who hadn't put down a heavy thing in a very long time. And there was something else she couldn't name. A weight around him that felt less like mood and more like pressure. Follow me. She led him to the back of the shop, to the locked case she called the practitioner's corner. As they walked, she waited for his true name to arrive. It didn't. She slowed her pace slightly, checking. She'd never met anyone, human, supernatural or otherwise, whose true name stayed silent. It was like an instinct failing to fire. A step where the ground wasn't there. These 3. She unlocked the case and pulled the volumes out one by one. This one classifies and diagnoses curse structures. This one covers known breaking methods organized by curse type and origin. And this. She set the third one on the shelf between them carefully. Is the most complete text on name magic I've ever encountered. I found it in an estate sale in Brittany. I've kept it out of sale inventory because I wasn't finished studying it. He touched the cover of the third book with something that looked like reverence, and she noticed his hands weren't entirely steady. I need it. Whatever you want for it. Tell me your name first. The words arrived before she decided to say them. He went still. Why? Because I don't sell those books to strangers. She held his gaze. And because you're the first person I've ever met whose true name I can't hear. And that has never happened before. Something moved through his expression, surprise, then a rapid comprehension, then something raw and bright and desperate all at once. You can hear true names. Not a question. He already knew. Or had hoped. I can, Mara said. I hear what someone is beneath whatever name they introduce themselves with. I've had it my whole life. I don't know what it is exactly. A gift or a curse depending on the day. A gift, he said, with a certainty that was almost startling. Unambiguously. He extended his hand. Caden Voss, Alpha of the Ironwood Pack. Mara shook his hand, and lightning went up her arm. Caden's breath audibly caught. Neither of them let go immediately. Both caught in the current of it, some circuit closing that neither had known was open. Mara Delacroix, she said. I own this shop. I'm human if that matters. It doesn't. His thumb moved across her knuckles, deliberate, she decided, not accidental. But I want to understand something. You've never met anyone whose name stayed silent? Not once. Never. Until you. She withdrew her hand slowly. Why can't I hear yours? Because my true name was taken from me. Sealed behind a curse placed by my grandfather when I was 9 years old. A curse that is going to kill me in 3 days, unless someone can whisper that name before the full moon rises. He said it plainly without performance, watching her face. Mara stood with that information for a moment. She should have reached for a rational explanation. She should have stepped back, assessed, maintained her careful distance from the supernatural world that kept pressing against the edges of her life. Instead, she said, sit down and tell me everything. They moved to the reading nook at the back of the shop. 2 worn leather chairs, a low table between them, the particular quiet of a place where books absorbed sound. Mara made coffee while Caden talked, and as he laid out the history, the grandfather destroyed by grief and dark magic, the curse placed on a child as punishment for a father's choices, the impossible conditions engineered into the breaking, Mara felt something she could only describe as recognition. This was why the bookshop existed. Why the gift had been given to her and not someone else. Why she'd felt, since opening Thornfield's doors, that she was positioned here for a reason she hadn't yet understood. So the name you need spoken was taken before you even fully knew it, Mara said. And because it was taken, not just hidden, I can't hear it even with the gift. The silence I'm encountering isn't an absence. It's a theft. Caden's expression shifted. That's the most accurate description I've heard of it. Yes. And the person who speaks it has to be willing, understanding what they're doing, and, she paused on the phrase she'd heard before in old texts, pure of heart. Which most interpretations agree means acting from genuine care. Possibly love. He held her gaze without apology for the word. I'm not asking you to fall in love with a stranger, Mara. I want to be clear about that. But I need your help. I've run out of every other avenue. And you're the first person whose gift could theoretically pierce through to a hidden name. And there's a mate bond, Mara said. He blinked. My seer told you? No. I can hear your seer's name in my memory. She who walks between what was and what will be. Very on the nose. She folded her hands around her coffee cup. I've been reading about werewolves for 3 months. I know what a mate bond is. And I can feel it, Caden. Right now sitting here. Something pulling toward you that has no business existing after 10 minutes of conversation. He went very still. You can feel it already. It feels like remembering something I was supposed to know. She kept her voice measured. Which is either the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced or deeply alarming. And I haven't decided which. Both, Caden said quietly. It's both, honestly. They sat together for the rest of the morning, going through the book she'd pulled, mapping what he knew about the curse's structure against what the text described. Caden explained the ritual fragments he'd witnessed at 9, the ash circles and blood-sealed words, the terrible patience of a man performing something he'd rehearsed, and Mara cross-referenced with everything she'd studied. She used my blood, Caden said. I mean, my grandfather. He cut my palm and spoke the sealing words in Old Norse mixed with something older. He said, I've spent 20 years memorizing this. Your name is mine now, folded into darkness where even your own hands cannot reach it. Only the one who hears the world's true voice may call it back. And they must do so willing, knowing, and clean of heart before the moon makes 31 years of your life its last accounting. Willing, knowing, clean of heart, Mara echoed. The word he used for clean. Do you remember the original? Rain. Caden frowned. Old Norse. It can mean clean, but it can also mean pure, undivided, whole. Mara looked at him. Love, in the tradition of the old magic, is sometimes described as the only state of being that is fully reign, because it is the one human experience that isn't split or strategic. When it's real, it's complete. Their eyes met over the table, and the air between them did something neither of them commented on. So you'd have to genuinely care about me, Caden said. In 3 days. Which everyone sane would say is impossible. Mara didn't look away. You can't manufacture care. It doesn't respond to a deadline. Unless the mate bond accelerates something real. His jaw was tight. I'm not asking you to perform emotion, Mara. I'm not asking you to lie to the universe. But if we spend these 3 days together, if we let the bond develop the way it's already trying to, maybe what grows will be enough. And if it's not? Then I die knowing I met my mate. His voice was quiet and absolute, which is more than I've allowed myself to hope for in a very long time. I would take 3 days with you over a century with anyone else. Mara looked at him, at the exhaustion and the ferocious determination underneath it, at the care he was taking not to pressure her even while his life hung in the balance. She thought about her grey-tant's letter, about the gift she'd never been able to explain to anyone, about the specific gravity of this moment, this man, this choice. I'll help you, she said. But I need you to understand that I don't know if I can do this. I've never used the gift deliberately. I've never tried to reach toward something hidden. I don't have a map for this. We'll build one together. His smile was the first fully unguarded thing she'd seen from him, warm and real and luminous with relief. Thank you, Mara. You have no idea what. I think I might. She took his hand across the table, and the connection flared between them like something that had been waiting for permission. Where do we start? Chapter 3. The drive to Ironwood territory took nearly 3 hours, climbing through mountains that grew wilder with every mile until Caden turned onto an unmarked road that her phone's GPS refused to acknowledge. He'd been quiet for stretches, and Mara had found she didn't need to fill the silence. It was a comfortable kind, the kind that already existed between people who'd known each other longer than they had. Tell me what I'm walking into, Mara said as the trees thickened to cathedral density around them. Caden glanced at her. 81 people who take their loyalty seriously. They'll be cautious with you at first. They've learned the hard way that outsiders carry risks. But they're good, Mara. Fundamentally good. They'll accept me because of you. They'll accept you because of the bond. Wolves can send a mate connection. It registers on both of you now. You'll have immediate standing, which also means immediate attention. He paused. Some will wonder whether a human mate is the right choice for their alpha. Some will worry about pack security. And at least 3 of them will have started planning a bonding ceremony before we've broken the curse. Bonding ceremony. Mara's voice moved slightly upward. Like a wedding, but with significantly more ceremony and a ritual element that's difficult to describe. A slight smile. We're not there. First, let's keep me breathing. They drove through an automatic gate and into what looked less like a compound and more like a village swallowed by forest. Houses tucked between old-growth trees, connected by worn paths. A central structure that seemed to serve as lodge, meeting hall, and hearth all at once. As they stepped out of the vehicle, Mara felt the weight of attention settle over her. Eyes from porches, from paths, from the shadows between trees. Some in human form, some not. All of them focused with an intensity that had nothing casual in it. They're watching, she said quietly. They're curious. Caden took her bag from the back seat. We don't receive human visitors. And we've never had an alpha's mate arrive. He looked at her. I can take you back if this is too much. Mara assessed the faces she could see. Cautious, yes, and measuring, but not hostile. She felt something she couldn't quite name underneath the anxiety. Something about the way the pack's attention surrounded Caden with a specific, proprietary warmth. I'm not leaving, she said. Let's go break this curse. The relief that moved across his face was worth every uncertain step she was taking. He placed his hand at the small of her back, protective, not possessive, though the line was fine, and guided her toward the lodge. Inside it was warm, heavy-beamed, the kind of space built to hold a community through long winters. A fire burned in a massive stone hearth. A man came to meet them, broad and sandy-haired, with blue eyes that did an immediate, frank assessment of Mara before softening into something grudging but genuine. So this is her. Jasper, this is Mara Delacroix. Mara, my beta Jasper Kane. Caden's hand stayed where it was. Be decent. I'm always decent, Jasper said, without complete conviction. He offered his hand. Welcome to Ironwood. Did you find anything useful? Mara shook his hand and heard his true name immediately. Iron Faithful who does not bend or leave. Some leads, Caden answered. We need Sylvie. Is she here? Ritual room. She's been there since you called from the road. Jasper's expression sharpened. The pack is asking questions, Caden. People feel it through the bonds. Whatever is wrong with you, they feel the edges of it. I know. Hold it as long as you can. Alpha. A new voice came from the hallway. A woman, perhaps 50, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that seemed to be processing several things at once. You brought her. Good. Sylvie, meet Mara. Mara, our seer and healer Sylvie Croft. Sylvie's true name arrived with unusual clarity. She who walks between what was and what will be. Exactly as Mara had said. The seer studied her for a moment, then nodded once, satisfied. The bond is there and it's already pulling. That's what we need. She turned toward the hallway. Come. Time is not behaving generously. They followed her to a circular room at the lodge's center. Carved symbols in the wooden floor, shelves covering the walls, bundles of dried herbs alongside crystals and implements Mara had only encountered in books. A low table surrounded by cushioned floor seating occupied the middle. Sit, Sylvie instructed. Mara, Caden has told you the basics? His true name was sealed when he was 9, as part of a death curse. Someone with the gift of true names has to whisper it before the full moon rises on his 31st birthday. 3 days from now. Willingly, knowingly, and pure of heart. Correct. What he may not have had the chance to tell you. You have 3 attempts. Sylvie's voice carried the weight of someone delivering a sentence. 3 chances to speak his true name. Each failed attempt will cost him, weaken him, bring the curse's end closer. The 3rd failure triggers immediate activation. The full moon becomes irrelevant. Mara absorbed this. So we can't guess. We have to be certain. Precisely. Which brings us to your gift. Sylvie leaned forward. Tell me how it works in your own language. Mara thought about it carefully. When I meet someone, there's a moment where I see through to what they are. Not character exactly, more fundamental than that. Their core nature, who they are beneath every performance and adaptation. And in that moment, their true name is simply there, like a word I already knew. She looked at Caden. With you there's nothing. A shaped absence where the name should be. Like something was removed carefully, so the space it left is still clearly the shape of it. Well described, Sylvie said. The absence is indeed shaped. And that shape is what we have to work with. She opened a worn leather journal. Aldrich Seal is layered, 3 nested spells, each requiring a different kind of connection to unlock. Think of them as 3 locked doors, each door only visible once the previous one is open. What opens them? Caden asked. The first. Physical presence sustained. Skin contact, proximity, the body's language of trust. The mate bond strengthens through physical closeness, and that strengthening begins to erode the first layer. Minimum 8 hours. She held up a deep red crystal, already faintly glowing. This tracks the progress. When it changes from red to green, the layer is open. Mara looked at it steadily. And the second layer? Emotional nakedness. Both of you, every fear, every wound, everything you normally keep protected. The vulnerability has to be mutual and genuine. That layer takes a minimum of 12 hours. She pulled a second crystal blue from the shelf. And the third layer requires love. Freely given, unperformed, pure of heart. 24 hours minimum. Possibly more, depending on what you build. Silence. Caden calculated aloud. 3 days total. 8 plus 12 plus 24 is 44 hours of minimum processing time. The full moon rises 72 hours from now. That leaves us 28 hours of margin. If each layer opens at exactly the minimum, Sylvie said. If there are no complications. If the love that opens the third layer is deep and real enough to satisfy a 22-year-old death curse sealed in old blood magic. She folded her hands. The margin is not generous. Nearly, Mara said, returning to the word she'd borrowed earlier. Not impossible. Nearly. After Sylvie gave them a cabin on the territory's outer edge and the first red crystal with its instructions, and after she left them alone, Mara and Caden sat in the small main room with the weight of it all arranged between them. This is profoundly strange, Mara said finally. I want to acknowledge that. We met 8 hours ago and were being asked to compress a relationship into 3 days to satisfy a dead man's death curse. It is profoundly strange, Caden agreed. And I want to say clearly that if you want out at any point, I will take you back to Harrogate and we never speak of this again. You owe me nothing. Stop offering me exits. I accepted the situation with open eyes. She slid closer to him on the couch and held out her hand. Layer 1. 8 hours. Tell me about your pack. He looked at her offered hand for one unguarded moment. Then he took it, his fingers folding over hers with a careful warmth that felt like its own kind of language. And he talked. He told her about inheriting the alpha role at 23, about the year it nearly broke him, about the decision to rebuild Ironwood's alliances instead of waging the retaliatory war his grief had wanted. He told her about Jasper's unfailing loyalty, about Sylvie's wisdom that went deeper than prediction, about the children of the pack who had begun presenting themselves at his door with small, solemn questions about how the world worked. They trust me with their real questions, he said quietly. Not the tidy ones. The frightening ones. That matters to me more than any display of authority. You love them, Mara said. They are what I'm for, he said simply. Everything I've done every hard year, it's been in service of them. Pack is not a duty I carry. It's what I am. Mara leaned against his shoulder, and his arm came around her as if it had always belonged there. She told him about the bookshop, about the years of reading and studying that had been, she understood now, preparation. About growing up in a family that loved her but couldn't quite understand her. About learning to keep the gift quiet so as not to confuse people. About finding her grey-tant's letter and feeling, for the first time, that the strangeness of her had a lineage. It was supposed to be my shelter, she said. My controlled space. The place where the world moved at my pace. And instead it's the place fate used to find you, Caden said. Something like that. She tilted her head to look at him. You think that's comforting? I think destiny has a terrible sense of drama. But yes, I find the fact that I was led to you specifically somewhat comforting. Something in his voice shifted. If you survive this, Mara said, catching herself and changing it. When you survive this, what's the first thing you want? He thought for a long moment genuinely. To run without a destination. Just shift and cover miles with no weight on me. No clock, no death sentence, just the forest and my own legs. His eyes were distant. And then to take you somewhere. Properly. A real evening, no emergency driving it. No cursed crystal on the table. Just you and I. Getting to know each other without the world watching. You want to date me, Mara said, a small smile reaching her. Desperately. His voice was low and sincere. I want to earn the version of this that develops slowly. The version where I learn what you find funny, and what you find irritating and what you read when you can't sleep. I want to take time with you, Mara. Which is infuriating given that time is the one resource I'm out of. When we survive, she said. Then we take time. When, he agreed. They talked through the evening and into the night, shifting to the bed when the couch became uncomfortable, lying facing each other with the red crystal glowing on the nightstand between them, building the first careful architecture of something real. When Mara finally felt sleep pulling her under, she felt it happening, faint as a sound heard through walls, distant as a word she didn't quite catch. The shape of a name just beyond reach, trying to find its way toward her. The first layer was beginning to move. Chapter 4. Morning came through the cabin's single large window and landed on Caden's face, and Mara woke to find herself tucked against his side as if she'd decided that in the night without consulting her waking self. He was already awake. He'd been watching her, she realized, not in any unsettling way, but with the particular attention of someone who hadn't wanted to miss a moment. Did it open? She asked, her voice still rough with sleep. About an hour ago. He nodded toward the crystal on the nightstand, which had shifted to a calm, steady green. First layer. Mara propped herself up. The crystal pulsed gently like something breathing. Then we're behind. We need to start layer 2. Leah Sylvie arrived as if she'd been waiting outside the door, which she probably had been, carrying a tray with food and a blue crystal that Mara's stomach tightened to see. Layer 2, the seer said, setting both on the table. I'll say it plainly. This is harder than the first layer. Physical closeness can be achieved through proximity and patience. Emotional vulnerability is different. It requires you to open what you've built your life around keeping closed. She looked at Caden. Every fear that lives under the alpha. Every wound you've never spoken aloud. She turned to Mara. And the same from you. The vulnerability must be mutual. The curse is a balance. One person's openness alone won't satisfy it. How long? Minimum 12 hours. But that's if it's deep, genuine, and sustained. Sylvie left the blue crystal on the table and walked out, pausing in the doorway. You have roughly 36 hours until moonrise. Think about that math carefully. They ate breakfast in a silence that had changed texture overnight. Less awkward, more weighted with what they both knew was coming. You should go first, Mara said. Your curse. Your opening move. Caden set down his coffee. My greatest fear as Alpha is that I'll die and the pack will fracture. That the structure I've spent 6 years building will be pulled apart by challengers before Jasper is ready. And people will get hurt because I wasn't. That's your Alpha fear, Mara interrupted. I can hear the difference. What about Caden's fear? The man, not the role. He looked at her sharply. Then a muscle in his jaw shifted and he stood, moving to the window the way people move when they need the distance. I am terrified, he said at last. That there is something fundamentally wrong with me that I have never been able to locate or fix. Something that kept people from staying. My mother left. My grandfather looked at me and saw something worth destroying. And I've spent 22 years watching other wolves find their mates, build their bonds, and I've been silent. Like whatever calls mate to mate in me was broken or absent. He stopped. And then I walked into your bookshop and felt the bond like a shout, and my first thought was, what if this is also the curse? What if the only reason you can feel drawn to me is because fate needed you close enough to save me? What if the connection isn't real? What if, after the curse breaks, you feel nothing, and you walk away, and I've been wrong about having a mate the same way I've been wrong about everything else? The quiet after that was a kind of tenderness. Mara crossed to him and took his hands. My turn. She made him sit back down and held his hands across the small table. My deepest fear is that I am insufficient. That there is a version of enough that other people access naturally and I have never found the on-ramp to. Her voice was steady but thin at the edges. I grew up in a family that was functional and busy, and never quite had room for someone who heard names that weren't being spoken. I learned to make myself smaller and quieter, to compress the parts of myself that confused people, to be agreeable rather than present. She exhaled. And I built the bookshop as the first space that was entirely mine, where the gift was an asset, not a problem, where I set every rule. And it worked. I am happy there. She paused. But I'm also completely alone in it. Because I never learned how to stop compressing myself with other people. Because every time someone got close enough to see the real version, the one who hears what you truly are, who sometimes knows more about you than you know about yourself, they got uncomfortable. And left. Caden's grip on her hands tightened. And now there's you, she continued. And a mate bond. And a 3-day deadline. And I am terrified of two contradictory things simultaneously. That I won't be enough to break this curse and you'll die. And that I will break it and the bond will be real and I'll fall completely in love with a werewolf alpha whose life is bigger and more dangerous than anything I've built for myself. And I will have given everything to someone who, she stopped. Who what? Caden asked. Who lives in a world that could take him from me by 100 means even after this curse is broken. She looked at him. I spent my whole life being careful. Controlled. Not letting anyone get deep enough to do real damage. And in 3 days you've already gotten past everything I built. They held each other for a moment before they spoke again. Two people in the early architecture of something significant, sitting with the parts of themselves they normally kept in the walls. I have more, Mara said. More things that live in the dark. So do I, Caden said. We have 12 hours. And so they use them. They talk the way people talk when they have decided to stop editing. Caden admitting the specific failures of his leadership he'd never confessed to anyone. The pack members hurt under decisions he'd made wrong. The nights he'd wondered if his father's death had been punishment for something in the bloodline and not just chance. Mara talking about the relationship she'd ended before they ended her. About the specific loneliness of being able to hear everyone's truest self and feeling unseen in return. About the fear that her gift was a consolation prize for a life where connection wouldn't otherwise work. 3 months maximum, she said. That's how long I've managed any relationship. I find a reason, timing, incompatibility, I'm too busy, but the truth is always the same. The closer they got, the more I could feel the moment coming when they decide the strange parts of me were too much. And the foster homes? Caden asked quietly. Mara looked at him. I didn't say anything about foster homes. You said you grew up between your mother's apartment and relatives. The way you described it, it has a shape I recognize. My beta grew up in placement. She was quiet for a moment. My mother had a long illness when I was 7. She recovered, but the in-between years were scattered. I was with 3 different relatives in 4 years. They were kind enough. But kind enough and home are different things. They are, Caden agreed. I was always aware in every house that I was a temporary situation. That my belonging was contingent. She looked out the window at the forest. I became very good at being easy to have around. Low maintenance. Useful. Not asking for too much space. A beat. Which is its own kind of survival skill and its own kind of damage. Caden reached for her hand without speaking. She let him take it. By the time the afternoon light had shifted all the way through orange and into the blue hour before dark, they were sitting on the porch, and the conversation had moved from wounds to aspirations, what they wanted from the years ahead, what kind of life looked worth fighting toward. Belonging, Mara said when he asked her. Genuine belonging, not the performed kind. A place where being exactly who I am, gift and all, is not something to manage or apologize for. She looked at him sideways. And maybe that's here. I can't know yet. But it feels possible in a way things haven't felt possible before. It is possible, Caden said. Ironwood will take time to know you for yourself, beyond the bond. But they will know you, and what they find will earn their loyalty. I am already certain of that. When Caden kissed her for the first time, it was late enough that the stars had arrived, and the fire they'd built inside had settled to coals, and it happened quietly, no dramatic approach, just the end of a sentence that seemed to suggest it naturally. His hand coming up to her face with a carefulness that made her breath go uneven. It was a question more than a statement. She answered it thoroughly. I was not expecting tonight to end this way, Mara said when they both caught their breath. Somehow I was, Caden said. From approximately the moment you told me I was the first person whose true name you couldn't hear. Around midnight, the blue crystal on the table pulsed once, brilliant and sustained, and shifted to green. Mara felt it before she saw it. A small unlocking somewhere near her sternum, like a door finding its frame. Layer 2, she said. One more. Caden's expression was complex. Relief and terror in roughly equal measure. And 24 hours minimum. We have 36 to moonrise. 12 hours of margin. If nothing else goes wrong. He looked at her in the firelight. Ready. I've been ready since I decided to let you in, Mara said. Let's go. Chapter 5. Caden led her through Ironwood territory the next morning when the light came sideways through the trees and turned everything gold. He showed her the places that had made him, the sparring ground where he'd learned to fight through pain, the creek where he'd come as a child to be small and quiet when being Alpha's son was too loud, the ridge where he'd stood at 23 and made the decision that defined everything after. I was convinced I was too young, he said at the ridge's edge, the forest spreading below them like a green sea. That I'd gotten the role by accident of blood, not earned it. I stood here for about 2 hours. And eventually I looked out at all of it, the territory, the people, the thing my father had given his life for. And I realized that turning away from it would cost more than taking it on. Do you ever wish you had? Mara asked. No. Immediate certain. Even the worst of it. Even the curse. Every hard year has made me someone capable of protecting this specific community. And I can't find it in me to regret any of it. He looked at her. Does that seem like rationalization? It seems like someone who has genuinely made peace with their life, she said. Which is rarer than it should be. They walked on and Caden introduced her to the pack in small clusters. An elderly pair who had known his father and treated Caden with a specific unsentimental affection that said everything about the kind of alpha he was. A young couple with a new infant who offered Mara tea with the formal politeness of people who took hospitality seriously. A cluster of teenagers who were very transparently trying to make an impression on their alpha's mate, which Caden pretended not to notice, which made Mara like him considerably more. They're yours, Mara said as they walked on. I don't mean that in a possessive sense. I mean you can see it in how they look at you. You are theirs and they are yours, and everyone in the equation knows it. Pack is built into the bones after long enough, Caden said. It doesn't feel like a structure anymore. It feels like breathing. They ate lunch at a place he'd clearly had in mind from the start. A narrow waterfall spilling into a pool of glacially clear water, the surrounding trees old enough that their roots had reshaped the ground around them into something like a natural amphitheater. The sound absorbed everything else. Mara sat on sun-warmed granite and thought, I could learn to want this. Then immediately wondered if the mate bond was producing the thought for her. Can I ask you something, she said. About the bond itself? Not what it does, I understand what it does. But whether what I feel right now is mine. Caden set down his lunch carefully. Tell me the question more specifically. Before yesterday what I wanted from my life was clear. Independence. A space I'd built. Work that used my gift without putting me at anyone's mercy. The bookshop was all of that. She looked at the water. And now I'm sitting in a forest on a mountain with a werewolf alpha I met 36 hours ago, feeling more at home than I have in my own building, and I can't entirely trust whether that's real or whether the bond is manufacturing it. Because if the bond is responsible, Caden said slowly, then the feeling goes away when the pressure does. Or when you're no longer in crisis. When the emergency lifts and I discover I'm just a human woman who got swept up in something large and supernatural and mistook urgency for belonging. Caden was quiet for long enough that Mara looked at him. May I offer something? He said. And you can tell me if it sounds like someone trying to serve his own agenda. I'll tell you, she confirmed. Before I met you, I had stopped expecting a mate. Not because I decided against it, because I come to believe the curse had made me incompatible with that kind of connection. Something sealed, not available. And when I walked into your shop and felt the bond, he paused. My first response wasn't relief. It was grief. Because I thought, now I know what I've been without and I'm going to lose it in 3 days. The bond made the loss worse before it offered any hope. That's not a sales pitch, Mara acknowledged. No. My point is, the bond didn't make me want you because it needed you compliant and nearby. The bond recognized something that was already there to be recognized. The connection exists because we are genuinely compatible in ways that have nothing to do with curse breaking. He held her gaze steadily. I believe what you feel is yours, Mara. I believe the bond is revealing it, not fabricating it. But I also know I am a biased witness. So I have to decide for myself, she said. You always did. Sylvie emerged from the tree shortly after, appearing with the specific unstartling quality of someone who had clearly been nearby for a while. I heard what you're wrestling with, the seer said, settling onto the rock beside Mara without apology. I'll tell you what I can see from outside it, and then I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions. Go ahead, Mara said. The mate bond is visible to me as a seer. It has a texture. I can tell a natural bond from an induced or coerced one the way you can tell genuine laughter from performed laughter. Yours is natural. It's been growing organically since you met, strengthening along the normal developmental lines, fed by real interaction rather than external pressure. Sylvie's expression was matter of fact. The bond didn't put your feelings there. It found feelings that were already possible and gave them a channel. Whatever you'd feel for Caden if you'd met under unremarkable circumstances, you're feeling it now, condensed. You're certain, Mara said. I've been watching mate bonds form for 40 years. I'm certain. Sylvie stood. And for what it's worth, Mara, I've been watching Caden carry his grandfather's cruelty for 6 years as alpha. I have been hoping for someone specific enough to meet him where he is. She glanced at Caden with a fondness that was somewhat maternal. He chose well. And so did you, even if you didn't choose the timing. She walked back into the trees, and the waterfall covered her departure. Well, Mara said after a moment. She does that, Caden said. Delivers verdicts and vanishes? Without exception. Mara laughed, fully not performed, and felt the sound fill the space around the waterfall and come back to her changed. She looked at Caden at the way he was looking at her, and something in her chest settled into a new configuration. I think I'm falling in love with you, she said. I'm being precise about the tense because I'm not there yet, but the trajectory is clear. Caden's eyes darkened to amber. I know. I've been falling since the moment you told me I was the first person you couldn't hear. That's very fast. I've been waiting a long time, he said simply. They were still at the waterfall when Jasper appeared on the path behind them, and Mara read his face before he spoke a word. What is it? Caden said. Not a question. Greystone Pack. They've moved 30-odd fighters to our eastern perimeter. They're not committing to anything yet, but they're feeling for weakness. Jasper's jaw was rigid. They know something's off with you. They're testing what we'll do. Caden transformed. Not physically, his body didn't shift, but everything else did. The relaxed afternoon man was replaced instantly, cleanly, by something with harder edges and a heavier center of gravity. Double the Eastern Patrol. I want confirmed headcount on the Greystone fighters within the hour. And send their alpha a message in my name. Any incursion will receive a response that he will not enjoy. We are not weak. We are not available. He looked at Jasper. Go. After Jasper disappeared at a run, Caden turned to Mara with frustration pulling at the corners of his mouth. I'm sorry. I have to. Go be alpha, Mara said. I'm coming with you. He looked at her. You don't have to. You said you want me where you can see me while Greystone is rattling the fences. I want to see you work. She stood. Besides, I've been in the woods all day. A change of setting. She spent the evening in the lodge's operations room, watching Caden command a crisis with the specific competence of someone who had been doing this long enough that it was no longer impressive. It was simply natural. He was calm under pressure the way certain materials are strong. Not dramatically, just reliably. Your mate is extraordinary, said a voice beside her. A woman, perhaps 60, with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair worn simply. Her true name arrived immediately. She who holds the pack together between storms. I'm Bridget, the woman said. I keep watch over the children when the pack has other demands. I wanted to meet you properly. She studied Mara without pretense. You're here to break the curse. I'm trying, Mara said. Everyone knows by now, though Caden tried to keep it contained. Pack bonds don't filter very well. When the alpha suffers, we suffer with him. We've been feeling something wrong for months. Bridget's voice was steady and direct. I'm not telling you this to increase your pressure. I'm telling you so you understand what it means to this community if you succeed. And so you understand that what you're doing here has already changed things. Watching him tonight. She glanced toward Caden across the room. There's something different in him. Something he hasn't had since before his father died. What? Hope with an object, Bridget said. Hope that's about something specific, not just general refusal to give in. She smiled and it was warm without being sentimental. Fight for him, Mara. He's worth fighting for. So is this. The Greystone crisis resolved by midnight. Their fighters withdrew after Caden's response made the cost calculation clear. When Caden finally crossed the room to her, he looked exhausted and slightly luminous with relief. You're still here, he said. Where would I go, she said. They walked back to the cabin without the urgency of before, comfortable in the dark, in the cold, in the sound of the forest adjusting itself around them. The red crystal sat on the table where they'd left it, not yet green, but pulsing now in a slow, steady rhythm that Mara was almost certain was synced to her heartbeat. I meant what I said at the waterfall, Caden said quietly as they got ready to sleep. I'm falling in love with you. I know how fast it is. I know all the reasonable objections. I don't have an argument against any of them. Then don't argue, Mara said. Just keep being honest. I love you, he said. Already. I know it's unreasonable. I love you, she answered. I've known for most of the afternoon. They looked at each other in the dark of the cabin, the weight of it between them like something newly solid, something real enough to bear weight. The red crystal pulsed and went on pulsing, catching the rhythm of both their hearts now, responding to something building between them that was very nearly strong enough. 18 hours left to the full moon. The last layer was almost ready to move. Chapter 6. Mara woke before dawn and found the cabin wrong. Not wrong in any physical sense. The fire had banked correctly, the curtains were still, the crystal on the table still pulsed its slow red rhythm. The wrongness was in Caden, who was standing at the window with his back to her, and his shoulders set in a way she had not seen before. Caden. She sat up. What's happening? He turned and she understood immediately. The color had drained from his face in a specific way. Not pallor from cold, but from something working against him from the inside out. The shadows under his eyes had deepened into something resembling bruising. The curse is moving faster than it should, he said. His voice had roughened. Mara was out of bed and across the room before she'd fully decided to move. She took his hands. They were cold. Not the cool of someone who'd been standing near a window, but a different cold like something was drawing heat out of him from the inside. Sylvie, Mara said. Jasper already sent for her. Sylvie arrived in under 5 minutes, carrying her case of implements, and spent 10 minutes in focused, silent assessment while Mara held Caden's hands and tried to project steadiness she was not entirely feeling. It's fighting back, Sylvie said at last. The curse can sense that the third layer is close to opening. It's accelerating, trying to collect before you can complete the breaking. She looked up, and her expression was honest in the way of someone who has decided that false comfort does more harm than hard truth. I had been estimating you had until moonrise. I'm revising that estimate downward. Hours. Possibly fewer. The layer isn't open yet, Mara said. What does the third layer need that we haven't reached? You have the love, Sylvie said. Both of you, I can see it. But the curse knows this gift is old and specific. It was designed by someone who understood love precisely well enough to build a gate against it. She set her hands flat on the table. What opens the final layer is not love as feeling. It's love as willingness. The specific willingness to put the other person's life ahead of your own, not as abstraction, not as sentiment, but as a present tense choice you would genuinely make. That's what rain means in this context. Love that isn't split. Love that has no reservation. So we have to be willing to die for each other, Caden said. Not perform willingness. Be it. Sylvie held his gaze. Which is why the third layer is the one that breaks most breaking attempts. You cannot convince the curse. You can only be the thing it requires. After she left, Mara looked at Caden. He was sitting on the edge of the bed now, the posture of someone managing increasing physical discomfort, and she sat in front of him on the floor and took both his hands. Don't, she said. Don't what? Don't start organizing your affairs. Don't think about what Jasper needs to know, what the pack needs to prepare for. Don't start letting go. She held his gaze. Stay here with me. We are going to solve this. And if we don't, then we fail trying, and that's categorically different from deciding it's over. She pressed his hands between hers. I need you present, Caden. Not managed. Not pre-grieved. Here. He breathed in. Out. The line of his shoulders shifted. I'm scared. I know. Not of dying. I've been prepared to die since I understood what the curse meant. I'm scared of leaving you specifically. I've spent 3 days learning the shape of you and now I can't. The idea of not. He stopped. I know, Mara said again differently. They sat with the fear together, naming it rather than dismissing it, which was how they'd been doing everything. He talked about the future they'd sketched. Running through the forest without a ticking clock. Teaching her how pack territory worked through seasons. Learning her habits and preferences over years rather than days. She talked about it too, adding details. The bookshop expanded to serve both communities, the cabin made into something more permanent, the two of them building a version of belonging that worked for both of them. Promise me something, Caden said. If the worst. No. Mara, please. His hands tightened on hers. If the worst comes, stay. Not forever if you can't. But long enough to help Jasper through the first weeks. He'll need someone who can see the pack clearly, who can hear what they truly are, and help him understand what he's working with. You're the only one who can offer that. I'm not agreeing to that because we're not losing. But if. Caden. She cupped his face in both hands and made him look at her. I would rather this conversation end in us breaking a curse than in me making contingency arrangements. I'm not taking those out. She held his eyes. I love you. And that means I'm not planning your death. I'm fighting it. Something moved through him. He pulled her forward and held her, his arms enclosing her completely, his face in her hair. She felt it happen the way Sylvie had described it, not as decision but as recognition, as the arrival of something that had been true for longer than she'd had words for it. She would give her life for his. Without negotiation. Without reservation. If there were a trade to be made, she would make it in under a breath. That's what rain means. Love that isn't split. I would trade places with you, she said against his shoulder. If that were a mechanism that existed, if I could take this curse from you and have it come for me instead, I would. Without hesitation. Don't. I'm not offering to. I'm telling you what's true. She pulled back to look at him. I love you more than I love my own continuity. And I don't say that as sentiment. I'm telling you so you understand what I'm bringing to this breaking. I love you the same way, Caden said. I've been watching you from across this room all morning trying to figure out how to say it. There is nothing I wouldn't do to keep you safe. Every resource I have, every choice I'm capable of making, they all point toward you. Pure of heart. No reservation. The red crystal exploded. Not violently. It flared. A sudden brilliant white that overwhelmed every other color in the room. Pulsing so hard and fast it resembled a heartbeat at a full sprint. And Mara felt it. Not the crystal but something in the air between them. Something in the space the love had been building into. Crack. A seal breaking. A door swinging open. And through it finally clear as spoken language. His name. Not a word she could have found in any lexicon. An identity, a declaration. A truth so concentrated it arrived all at once like a sentence she'd always known and only just remembered. Shadow who chose light when darkness would have been easier. I can hear it, Mara said. Her voice came out strange, stretched, somehow vibrating at a frequency she didn't normally use. Caden. I can hear your name. His eyes went wide. Gold, fully gold, the wolf completely present. You have it. I have it. But... She looked at the window, at the sky that was still mid-morning gray. It's hours until moonrise. The curse specified before the full moon rises. Sylvie came through the door without knocking, which meant she had been waiting on the other side of it. Don't wait, she said, and her voice had an urgency Mara had not heard from her before. The acceleration is faster than I projected. If you hold until moonrise, there won't be enough of him left for the breaking to hold. You need to speak it now. But the conditions are met. Willing, knowing, pure of heart, all three genuinely, completely. The timing clause was built for an impossible scenario. Aldrich never imagined anyone reaching this point with hours to spare. Sylvie gripped Mara's shoulder. Speak it now. While there's enough of him to receive it. Mara looked at Caden. His color was worse than an hour ago. The gray deepening, a faint tremor in his hands he was trying to contain. The clock that had been running since the day his grandfather spoke those sealing words was approaching zero. What if it doesn't work, Caden said. Not a question. Thing he needed to say. Then we tried everything that was possible, Mara said. But that's not what happens. I believe in us. I believe in this love we built in 3 days that shouldn't have been enough but was. And I believe your grandfather, for all his cruelty, was not quite cruel enough to make the impossible actually impossible. She leaned her forehead against his. He left the door, Caden. He just made it nearly impossible to find. And we found it. You love me enough, Caden said. I love you without reservation. Which is the same thing. She breathed. I'm going to say your name now. And when I do, when the curse breaks, you are going to live. And then we are going to build the life we've been describing. Slowly, properly, with time. Understood. Understood, he said. Mara closed her eyes. She found the name where it lived now, clear and present and unmistakable. His in the same way that a heartbeat was his, in the same way that the choice to protect rather than harm was his, in the same way that the mate bond between them was his and hers and beyond either of them all at once. She gathered everything she had felt in 3 days, the recognition in the bookshop, the first night talking until sleep took them, the vulnerability of his fears laid out between them, the terror of watching the curse claim more of him each hour, the love that had arrived not as a decision but as a discovery, and she shaped all of it into a single, concentrated, unambiguous act of will. And she whispered his true name. Not aloud. True names don't travel through air. They travel through the part of a person that exists beneath language, beneath the ordinary frequency of communication. Shadow who chose light when darkness would have been easier. One breath of absolute silence. Then Caden's body went rigid, and the red crystal detonated into green light so intense Mara had to close her eyes, and she felt the curse fracture. Not in one piece but in many, like a structure that had been held together by compression and now had nothing left to press against. Every layer. All at once. 22 years of sealed dark magic unraveling in under a second. Caden went slack against her, and Mara caught him with both arms, her heart lurching. Caden. Here, he said. His voice was different, the roughness not gone but changed, the weight removed from it. I'm here. Mara, I can feel. He pulled in a breath and she watched color return to his face, slow and real like sunrise. It's gone. All of it. I can feel where it was. There's nothing there. The curse is broken, Sylvie said from the doorway. Her voice full of something Mara had not heard from her before. Wonder. completely and permanently dissolved. There is no trace remaining. Mara, she stopped. She pressed her lips together. What you just did has not been done in this community in living memory. You saved him. Mara was shaking. Adrenaline and relief in the aftermath of using her gift at that intensity, all of it arriving at once. Caden pulled her close and held her, and she let him, her face against his shoulder, feeling his warmth return under her hands. You saved me, he said quietly into her hair. We saved you, she answered. It took both of us to open every layer. I just spoke the last word. Outside she heard it begin. A sound rising from across the territory, spreading from person to person as the pack felt the change through their bonds. Something between a howl and a shout, wordless and full, the sound of a community that had been holding its breath, releasing it all at once. Their alpha was going to live. Chapter 7. The week after the curse broke was loud in the best possible way. Mara had never been at the center of a community celebration before. She'd spent most of her life at the edges of things, adjacent rather than included. The pack's response to her was the opposite of anything she had a framework for. She was introduced, embraced, welcomed with a specificity that made her understand, in her bones, what Caden had meant when he said pack wasn't a structure but a way of being. She'd gone back to Harrogate twice in the first week, both times with Caden, to check on Thornfield and arrange temporary management with a former colleague who'd been waiting for an opportunity. The bookshop looked exactly as she'd left it, and she'd stood in the doorway and understood that she was not returning, not really, not in the way she'd left. The place she'd built as shelter had given way to something more. You're quiet, Caden said on the drive back the second time. I'm thinking about what I'm choosing, Mara said. Not second-guessing. Actually thinking about it. There's a difference. Tell me the difference. Second-guessing looks backward. Choosing looks forward. She looked at the mountain road ahead of them. I built Thornfield as a refuge from belonging to something bigger than myself. And now I'm about to belong to something considerably bigger than myself. She paused. And it doesn't feel like loss. That's what I'm processing. Should it feel like loss? Maybe. To the version of me who built everything around not needing anyone. She glanced at him. But that version of me was also quite lonely. Caden reached across and took her hand on the gearshift without looking away from the road. On the 9th day after the breaking, Jasper found them at breakfast with his expression doing something complicated. The High Council is here, he said. They want to speak with both of you. The supernatural High Council sent 4 representatives, 3 stern and measuring, 1 openly fascinated, who arranged themselves in Caden's meeting room and made the specific kind of eye contact that was designed to remind you of their authority. Alpha Voss, said the senior representative, a woman named Assessor Vane. We've received confirmation of something that our records suggest has not occurred in over 4 centuries. A death curse sealed in bloodbound true name magic, broken by a human carrying the gift of true names. Her attention moved to Mara with the quality of a lens focusing. Ms. Delacroix, you have no formal training in magical practice? None, Mara confirmed. I've had the gift my entire life. I didn't have language for it until recently. And you were able to perceive Alpha Voss's sealed true name. A name locked behind 3 layers of blood magic placed by a practitioner with 40 years of experience, and speak it with sufficient clarity and intention to dissolve the entire construct. Yes. The council representatives exchanged a look that was trying to be opaque and wasn't entirely succeeding. This creates an unusual situation, said the second representative, a man named Auditor Crew. Ms. Delacroix, the gift you carry is extraordinarily rare. The last confirmed carrier was documented in the 1780s. Its applications in curse dissolution are theoretically broad, but empirically uncharted, because no carrier in living memory has been willing or able to put it to use in this way. He leaned forward. We would like to discuss a consulting arrangement. Mara felt Caden's posture change beside her. The particular stillness of someone deciding whether or not to speak. What kind of arrangement? She said. Advisory consultations on cases involving curse-afflicted individuals. Cases our existing practitioners have been unable to resolve. You would assess, advise, and where possible apply the gift. Assessor Vane's expression was calibrated for persuasion. There are dozens of people carrying curses that no one currently living has the capacity to address. You could meaningfully change that. With respect, Assessor, Caden said, and his voice had its alpha register. Mara is in the process of bonding with me and joining this pack. Her commitments here are. We would work around her schedule entirely, Vane said smoothly. And I would note that possessing a capacity to end suffering and choosing not to apply it is a choice with its own weight. Are you making an ethical argument? Caden said. Or an implied threat? We're pointing out that great gifts carry significant responsibilities, Vane said. The distinction is yours to draw. After the council left, Mara sat with Caden in the meeting room while the autumn light moved across the floor. They'll use you until there's nothing left, Caden said. I've seen how the council works with specialists. It starts as occasional consultations. It becomes a full-time relationship where you have no privacy, no home life, and your personal well-being is secondary to whatever case they've decided is most urgent. I know, Mara said. I also know that they're not wrong about the ethical weight of having a gift and not using it. She looked at him. And I spent my whole life not using it, and I don't want to go back to that. I'm not asking you to hide it. I'm asking you not to let them own it. Which is exactly what I intend. She turned to face him. I set terms before I agree to anything. Cap caseload, I decide the number and I hold to it. Cases come to me. I don't travel to the council. I retain the right to decline any case for any reason. And this is an ongoing renegotiation, not a permanent commitment. She held his gaze. I need you to trust me, Caden. I can navigate this without letting them consume me. I trust you, he said. I'm working on trusting the council. That's fair. I'm scared, he said quietly. Not of losing you to the council exactly, of losing you in general. I just got you. You have me, Mara said. And I am not easily lost. She squeezed his hand. Let me use this gift in a way that means something. On my terms. The tension between them lived for 3 days, present but workable. Caden supportive in practice, visibly working through his fear, saying so when Mara asked him directly. She appreciated that, the honesty about what was hard rather than the performed certainty that everything was fine. When the council sent her a photograph, a child perhaps 8 years old, with a mark on her forearm that Mara recognized from her reading as an active binding curse, Mara stared at it for a long time. The child's name was Petra. She took it to Jasper, not Caden. The beta's true name, Iron Faithful who does not bend or leave, had become a kind of shorthand for the quality she was looking for. Someone who would tell her the truth without managing her. Using a child is a classic pressure tactic, Jasper said, looking at the photograph. She's real, Mara said. Very probably. And if she is, and I have the capacity to help her, then you probably can't not try, Jasper finished. Because that's who you are. But Mara, the council knows that's who you are. That's why they sent the photograph instead of a case summary. I know. She looked at the image. What if I set the terms strictly enough that the precedent holds? One case. Trial basis. I establish from the first interaction what I will and won't do. That could work, Jasper said slowly. But you need to have the conversation with Caden directly. Not work around him. She found Caden at the training ground, running younger pack members through defensive techniques with the patient focus of someone who took teaching seriously. She watched until the session ended, recognizing in the watching something that had nothing to do with assessment and everything to do with simple pleasure in the sight of him. He looked up and saw her waiting, and something in his face relaxed. Walk with me, she said. They went to the waterfall, their place she was already thinking of it as, which felt true and somewhat terrifying. She laid out the conversation with Jasper, her thinking about terms, her understanding of the council's strategy. I'm not choosing the council over this, she said. I'm choosing to use what I have in a way that aligns with who I want to be. And I need you to support that, not because you're not afraid, but because you trust me to manage it. Caden was quiet for a long time watching the water. I'm operating from fear, he finally said. Not from assessment. And fear is a bad basis for asking someone to limit themselves. He looked at her. You're right. You've earned my trust a dozen times in 3 days, and I'm still treating this like it requires reassurance before I extend it. He exhaled. Try the case. One case, your terms. If the council respects the boundaries, we evaluate. If they don't, then we shut it down together, Mara said. Together, he agreed. 3 days after that conversation on the night of the full moon, precisely 1 month from the morning Caden had walked into Thornfield, the bonding ceremony took place in the central clearing of Ironwood territory. The whole pack was there, including 3 pack members from allied groups Caden had invited as a diplomatic gesture that was also, Mara suspected, a statement about his confidence in his future. Sylvie officiated, speaking in the old language about the nature of bonds and the specific nature of this one, which had traveled through death's shadow and come out the other side. Mara wore something Bridget had helped her find, deep green, the color of the forest, with small silver details at the collar that caught the moonlight. Caden wore dark clothing and, at his wrist, a bracelet of braided silver that Sylvie had made for the occasion. They faced each other in the firelight, with the pack around them like a living circle, and spoke vows that were their own, no borrowed language, no inherited forms. I vow, Caden said, to stand beside you rather than in front of you, to trust your judgment as I trust my own, to support the gift you carry without asking you to make it smaller, to be someone you can come home to in every sense of that word, for as long as I live. I vow, Mara said, to choose you every day, including the days when choosing is difficult, to bring my whole self here, not the carefully edited version, To be honest with you when I'm afraid and ask for what I need rather than managing in silence. To be your partner in everything, not your shadow or your echo. You're equal in everything that matters. Sylvie bound their wrists with a cord of silver and dark thread, and Mara felt the mate bond settle. Not snap, not surge, but settle, the way something finally finds the shape it was always supposed to be in. Complete. Solid. There. The pack howled and Jasper was grinning, and Bridget was crying, and Sylvie looked insufferably satisfied with her own prescience. Caden pulled Mara into a kiss that had the sound of it muffled by howling and laughter, and the enormous alive joy of a community that had come through something together. She had never, in 27 years, been at the center of anything like this. She had been waiting for it her whole life without knowing she was waiting. Chapter 8. Petra arrived 2 weeks after the bonding ceremony, accompanied by her father and a council liaison who had the professional warmth of someone trained in de-escalation. The girl was small for 8, her left forearm wrapped in a cloth bandage. She looked at Mara with the specific expression of a child who has been told what to hope for and is trying not to, in case the hope makes the disappointment worse. "Hello, Petra," Mara said, crouching to her level. "I'm Mara. I'm going to look at your curse and figure out what we can do about it." "The council lady said you broke a really hard curse," Petra said. "I helped break one. It was a team effort." "Is breaking mine a team effort too?" "Everything worthwhile is," Mara said. Over the following days, working with Sylvie and consulting the text from Thornfield that she'd had shipped to Ironwood, Mara built a detailed picture of Petra's curse. Its structure was superficially similar to Caden's, a name binding, set to terminate the host on a specific date, but its origins were entirely different. Petra had touched a contaminated object in an unregulated supernatural market, and the curse had transferred opportunistically. It had no specific design, no engineered conditions, no personality of the caster built into its architecture. "The good news," Sylvie said during one of their joint assessments, "is that generic curses are inherently less stable than personal ones. They're built for general application rather than specific targets." "The bad news," Mara said, "is that breaking it still requires name magic, and Petra's true name is not sealed. Which means I can hear it clearly." She looked at Sylvie. "But I can hear it clearly and feel. Nothing like what I felt with Caden. The pure of heart condition. Because you had 3 days of compressed intimacy and a mate bond driving your connection to him." Sylvie was matter of fact. "You don't have that with the child you met last week. So I can't break it the way I broke his." "You're assuming the mechanism must be the same," Caden said from across the room, where he'd been listening. Mara looked at him. Aldrich's curse required pure of heart love specifically because it was designed by someone who knew exactly how to require it. It was personal engineered, built around anticipated limitations. He came and sat at the table with them. But Petra's curse is generic. It's not engineered for specific conditions, which means it probably has a generic weakness. Mara was already moving. She pulled 3 texts, opened them on the table, and spent an hour cross-referencing while Caden and Sylvie watched and occasionally contributed. "Transfer clause," she said finally. "Generic binding curses placed through contamination, as opposed to targeted, almost always include a transfer mechanism, because they're designed to propagate. The original enchanter built in a pathway for the curse to move to new hosts. So it can be moved," Sylvie said, "to a willing recipient." Mara looked up. "Someone who consents to receive it. And if the recipient is already dying." She stopped, the implication landing with a weight. "The curse has no new host to build into," Caden said quietly. "It transfers, activates, and finds no viable future. It terminates with the host. Which is both an elegant solution and an awful one," Mara said. "It requires someone willing to die carrying a curse instead of dying without it." Bridget came to find Mara the next morning with the expression of someone who has already made a decision and is now looking for the conversation that confirms it. The pack's senior elder, a wolf named Aldous, was dying. He'd told Bridget a week ago. He had, at most a month. The deterioration was advanced enough that the pack healers had moved from treatment to comfort. When Mara explained the situation to Aldous, he listened with the focused attention of someone taking notes. "So the curse would transfer to me," he said. "Yes. And would activate and find me already in the process of dying, and would therefore terminate before it could do what it was designed to do. That's the theory. It's not tested. I won't tell you it's certain." "Nothing is certain," Aldous said. "I have 3 weeks, possibly 4. A curse has weeks at most to activate once transferred to a healthy host. On me." He considered. "What would it feel like?" "I don't know," Mara said. "I won't pretend otherwise." Aldous was quiet for a long moment. Outside, she could hear the sounds of Ironwood carrying on, children somewhere. The sound of activity from the training ground, someone splitting wood. "Let me do something with this dying," he said. "That is what I'd like. To do something with it." The ritual took place at midnight on the 14th day of Petra's stay in Ironwood. under a moon that was waning back toward darkness. Sylvie and Mara and Petra's father and Aldous, who had walked to the clearing under his own power and refused assistance. Mara had spent 3 days learning exactly how to use her gift in a new mode. Not listening for a true name already present, but actively locating the name of a magical construct. Curses, she discovered, had names the same way everything else did. The name of Petra's curse was not hidden. It was simply waiting to be called. Hunger that mistakes children for food. She said it once silently to confirm she had it. Then she extended her gift like a hand, and she called the curse by its name, and she named Aldous as the willing host, and she commanded the transfer. The curse resisted. It had 8 months of investment in Petra, and it recognized the new host as approaching death, and did not want an expiration date attached to its duration. Mara had been expecting resistance. She had felt resistance before in Caden's breaking, and she had moved through it. She was not the same person who had hesitantly told a werewolf alpha she wasn't sure if she could do this. She was someone who had learned what she was built for. Move, she said with everything she had. The curse moved. Aldous made a sound, not pain exactly, more like the sound of absorbing something large, and steadied himself and nodded to Mara once. It's in me, he said. Is it? Petra's father started. Done, Sylvie confirmed, her hands hovering over Petra, reading her. The curse is fully transferred. Petra is clear. Petra's father made a sound that was not words, and gathered his daughter, and held her for a long time with his face pressed into her hair. Thank you, Petra said to Mara, over her father's shoulder, with the gravity of a child who understood what had happened. And thank you, she said to Aldous. You will grow up, Aldous told her. And you will do something that matters. I am choosing to believe that. Petra looked at him. I will, she said. Aldous lived for another 3 weeks. The curse activated twice weekly, and found him already beyond its reach. He died in the early morning surrounded by the pack, telling stories about the years before Caden's father, when the mountains had been quieter. He was laughing at the end of one of them when he stopped. He chose the shape of his death, Caden said at the gathering the pack held in his memory. He looked at what remained and said, let me make this mean something. That is the truest thing I know about Aldous. And it is the truest thing I know about what this pack is at its best. Afterward, sitting at the waterfall with Caden's arm around her, Mara said, I did it without the mate bond, without romantic love. I found a different path to the same destination. You did, Caden said. Which means, the council is going to be very interested in the implications. And I'm going to have very firm things to say about the terms of their interest. She leaned against him. But not tonight. Not tonight, he agreed. In the months that followed, she consulted on 4 more cases. 2 resolved with transfer rituals. 1 resolved when she found a wording loophole in the curse's structure that allowed it to be challenged on its own terms. The 4th was beyond her. A curse so old and so specifically designed that she could hear its name and do nothing with it. And she said so clearly and accepted the failure and went home. You can't break every curse, Caden said. I know, she said. I'm getting used to knowing it. Life in Ironwood settled into the shape of something real. Thornfield reopened under new management with a supernatural text section that Mara curated remotely and visited monthly. She trained with the pack for fitness if not combat. She learned pack customs the way she'd always learned things, thoroughly with notes. She attended every gathering and introduced herself to every member until the pack knew her as Mara rather than as the Luna, as a person rather than as a role. And every evening she came back to the cabin that had become theirs, and to Caden, and to the specific and irreplaceable shape of the life they'd built from 3 impossible days. Happy? He asked one evening. Completely, she said. Which is new? I've been content before. I've been stable. Happy is different. How? It has an object, she said. It points at something specific. She looked at him. At you. At this. At all of it. He pulled her close and she let herself be held, and outside the forest did what forests do in the dark, moved and breathed and was, without any narrative required of it. Chapter 9. 1 year later. Mara stood in front of the cabin's small mirror adjusting a silver cuff, a bonding gift from Sylvie, engraved with the old word for rain, and tried to remember what she had been worrying about before she remembered what she was actually worrying about today. The council's annual review. And the other thing which she had told Caden 2 weeks ago and which still felt, each time she remembered it, like an entirely new piece of information. A baby. Half human, half Ironwood wolf, and according to Sylvie, who had been impractically delighted, likely to carry both the gift of true names and the pack bond instincts of a wolf. You look like you're running calculations, Caden said from the doorway. I'm preparing arguments for the council meeting. She turned. And also still processing everything else. Still. He crossed to her and folded her into his arms with the ease of a year of practice. I process things thoroughly, she said into his shoulder. It's a feature. Do you want to tell the pack tonight? Tonight, she confirmed. I want Bridget to know before she figures it out herself. The woman has gifts that aren't on any official registry. The pack meeting that evening was ordinary. Territory updates, seasonal preparations, a minor dispute about boundary markers that Caden resolved in 4 sentences. Mara had come to love these meetings for exactly what they were. Evidence of a community doing the ordinary work of existing together. Before we close, Caden said, and she heard the register shift into something personal, something he was choosing to be unguarded about in front of the people who were his. Mara and I have something to tell you. The reaction was immediate, warm and extremely loud. Bridget cried. Jasper's face did something complicated that eventually resolved into what was unmistakably joy. Sylvie looked precisely as smug as someone who had predicted this 6 months ago had every right to look. An alpha's heir, said one of the elders approvingly. A child who will belong to this pack, Mara said. Not because of bloodline. Because this is where they'll be raised. And this is what will make them who they are. The council's investigator arrived during the post-meeting gathering. A woman named Assessor Lorne who had reviewed Mara's cases for the past year with the professional thoroughness of someone who respected competence. Your outcomes this year are notable, Lorne said, having found Mara near the fire with a cup of tea. 5 cases. 3 successful resolutions. 1 partial improvement. 1 acknowledged failure with full documentation. The full documentation was important, Mara said. The council needs to know where the limits are. Indeed. Which brings me to their proposal. Lorne placed a tablet on the table between them. The council would like to expand the caseload. Substantially. No, Mara said. Ms. Delacroix. Substantially is not a word that applies to my situation. I'm 3 months pregnant, I manage a consulting practice across 2 communities, and I have a bonding ceremony's worth of obligations to this pack that I take seriously. She kept her voice pleasant and her eyes level. My caseload stays at 8 to 10 cases annually selected by me on my terms. If those terms don't work for the council is welcome to find someone else, though I would be curious where they intend to look. Lorne's expression moved through several things and arrived at something like respect. There is a second component to the proposal, she said. Not an expansion of your personal caseload. A program. Mara raised her eyebrows. Training. Curriculum development. You carry a gift that we now know can be taught, at least in part, or rather that exists in latent form in a small number of individuals who have never been identified or developed. You could locate them. You could teach them what you've learned. Mara sat with that for a moment. How small a number? Based on our best estimates, perhaps 12 individuals in North America, who carry some version of the true name gift. Most have suppressed it or misunderstood it. Lorne folded her hands. You could build a network of cursebreakers where currently there are none. Mara looked across the room at Caden, who was watching her with the specific expression of someone who has learned, over the course of a year, that his mate makes her own decisions and that the best thing he can offer is his trust. He raised his eyebrows. Your call. She turned back to Lorne. I need time. A year minimum, after the baby, after I have a sense of what capacity I actually have. She paused. And I would need to direct the program entirely. How it's structured, who's selected, what they're taught. The council funds and provides administrative support. They don't make pedagogical decisions. That would require some negotiation, Lorne said. Most worthwhile things do, Mara said. After Lorne left, she found Caden at their customary late evening position by the fire, and folded herself into the space beside him that had long since taken the shape of her. What are you thinking? He said. That I came to Ironwood to break one curse and ended up building something I didn't have the imagination to want before. She leaned against him. A practice. Community. You. She paused. And now possibly a school. A school you'll run on your own terms, Caden said. Strictly. Non-negotiably. She smiled. I learned from someone very good at holding a line. I learned from someone very good at knowing when a line is the right tool, and when it isn't. She looked up at him. We've been good for each other. From the first afternoon, Caden said. Though I was too desperate to appreciate it properly at the time. You were appreciating it fine, she said. You were just also dying. A minor complication. They walked to the waterfall later. They always ended up at the waterfall eventually. It had become the place where the day's noise settled, and stood together listening to the water in the dark. I have something for you, Caden said. He produced a small package wrapped in paper he'd clearly spent some time on. I was going to wait for the bonding anniversary next month, but this is the right moment. Inside was a notebook, small, leather-covered, its spine stamped in silver with her name in the old script Sylvie had been teaching her. What's this for? Your true name, he said. I've known it since we bonded. It came with the merging. I can hear you the same way you hear everyone else now. It's one of the things the bond gives. He looked at her. I've been waiting for you to ask, or for the right moment to tell you. May I? Mara's breath was unsteady. She had spent her entire life hearing the true names of everyone around her. Hearing who they really were, what they were made of, what their existence meant at its core. And she had never known her own. Yes, she said. Please. Caden took her hands the way she'd taken his once, with the weight of an entire world resting on what came next. And he spoke her true name into the space between them, not aloud but directly, the way true names traveled. Voice that opens what was sealed and does not fear the dark. The name moved through her the way a key moves through a lock, finding every pin, lifting every tumbler, opening the thing that had been waiting to be opened. It was perfectly, specifically, completely hers. She was crying. She became aware of this gradually, the way you become aware of rain that's been falling long enough to seem like it always was. That's who you are, Caden said quietly. That's who you've been your entire life. Someone who opens the sealed things, the curses, the wounds, the gifts people have suppressed because they didn't have context for them, and does it without flinching from what's dark in the process. You are extraordinary, Mara, and I need you to know that when I say it, I'm not speaking from love's distortion. I'm reading your true name. I love you, she said. I love you. More specifically and reliably every day. The moon was up, a generous 3/4 moon growing toward full, which no longer carried any weight of dread for either of them. The waterfall continued its patient, indifferent commentary. Mara thought about the morning she'd stood in Thornfield and watched a man she'd never seen before cross her floor, and heard the absence where his name should be, and felt something that she'd had no vocabulary for yet, the beginning of this. Of everything. What are you thinking? Caden asked. That impossible things really are possible. Just not easily. And not alone. She turned her face up to the moonlight. And that the impossible ones are the ones worth doing. I'd agree with that, Caden said. From personal experience. They walked back to their cabin through the dark in the forest and the particular sounds of Ironwood Pack living its life around them, children being called in from wherever they'd gotten to, voices carrying through the trees, the distant sound of someone at the fire ring, the sense of a community that knew itself and trusted its ground. Mara had spent 27 years on the edges of belonging. She had built a refuge instead of a home, competence instead of connection, comfort instead of the thing the gift had always been trying to prepare her for. She had found it in 3 impossible days. And every day since had been built on that foundation, not on the emergency or the curse or the ticking clock, but on the real thing that had formed underneath all of it. The love that wasn't split. The voice that opened what was sealed. The home she'd been trying to find her way toward all her life finally made. Again and again and again. Hey everyone, what a journey. I hope Mara and Caden's story found its way into your heart. If you loved this one, drop a comment below. Tell me your favorite moment. Was it the waterfall? The curse breaking? Little Petra? I want to hear from you. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new story. More impossible love stories are coming your way. I'll see you in the next one. Remember, sometimes the most sealed things just need the right voice to open them.